Yeah, I think that is. He's sitting in. Yeah. I know. Like, contract, like.
Yeah, might as well.
No, I'm not gonna stop. I'll have it. Yeah. If you don't mind it behind you.
No, not at all. I just. What you get? Coming through. I don't have a license for the same.
You're the family of
Oh my God, it was when you were.
Hello, fellow OT.
Hi, how are you?
Good, no
I know,
idea.
I'm so excited. I was like, I did not know that until you said that on Friday. I had no idea.
I kind of forgot about it. So I don't want Heather anymore. I'm so over it. You know?
Right.
You get
No,
burned
I feel
out.
you. No, I know. It's
Especially
exhausting.
head
Oh, yeah, you did head injuries. Those are very difficult.
What do you do?
Occupational therapy.
Oh, that you were on Zoom.
Yes, that was me
Oh,
on Zoom,
okay.
and I was like, wait, I didn't know you did OT because I've had like multiple conversations with her. She never brought it up, so I didn't know.
So she
But yeah, she's out of it now. I'm still doing it, but I'm in home health, so I go
Oh.
home to home.
Do you like that better, you think?
I do
No, I think
because
it
of the flexibility schedule, so it allows me to do real estate too. When I was in the hospital and skilled nursing, it was, I'm there. all
Hey,
day.
everybody.
I can't leave. I can't do anything.
Just
Exactly.
all right.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. She's bringing over copies. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the new contract, as Dylan said, and I know a lot of you are brand new and haven't even seen a contract period. But the new contract is a lot easier than the old contract. It's just everything is in a place where it should have been. The problem with the old contract, and it was argued for years, is as real estate law changed or whatever, they would just like, oh, we can put that here or we can put that there, right? And they just kind of threw it together. And it was good. I mean, let's face it, it's served us well for years, but the new one is much more organized. I guess that's the best way to say it. So she's going to pass out documents. A lot of you guys have it up on the screen. We're going to get started. If you have questions, put your hands up. Welcome, everyone. And I guess on this thing here, you can actually you can hit chat if you want to say something. So, okay. All right. So the contract's being passed out. Again, the way we do these meetings is we spend a little bit of time reviewing real world stuff that happened this week. Then we get into the actual contract. So this week, we had some things come up. Lisa is not here and she's not on right now. She's up in her Lisa sold her first house. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it. She sold it like she's only been in the business 2 weeks, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh
That was
shit,
amazing.
what do I do now?
Yeah.
Well, the problem with only being in the business 2 weeks and you've only been to one class, it's who knows what to do, right? And so it's been interesting, but it's been good for me because I know just, it reminds me how confusing it can be for brand new people, right? So anyway, so Lisa sold a house. It's going along fine. It's a house out in a rural area. The buyers bought the house and decided that they've come from a very handy, somebody in the family's a contractor type family. And the property needs a new septic system. But the buyer was willing to accept the septic system with full knowledge, with a report from a septic company saying what needed to be replaced, what needed to be repaired, right? So the listing agent told her that the buyer would have to accept that or pay more for the property, right? And it turns out the listing agent wasn't off by much because the appraisal actually came in about $20,000 more than the purchase price, right? So they did make a good buy on it. But one of the things that is a challenge, right, is when you have something like that, how do you get the buyer to sign off on that and basically indicate that they're willing to accept the property with that being there, right? And what we create is what we call Where are they? There's 4 pages. She'll have to bring them to you. Oh, you guys can share. Yeah, you can share. So anyway, you put together a letter of understanding, but what I really want, and I don't want to confuse things more than we're going to confuse people today already. So the thing that I found that she didn't understand is who does what, right? So the lender, the listing agent contacted her this morning and says, the appraisal contingency is due today. And so she calls me up and she says, what do I have to do with the appraisal contingency? And I said, well, you're the real estate agent. We need to remove the contingency if the appraisal's been done. Has the appraisal been done? She said, yes, it was done a couple days ago. And I said, did the appraisal come in at value? And she said, yes, it came in at value, right? So that's a pretty easy one, right? So there's a form, you guys all need to put this stuff in the back of your mind here, a CR form called contingency removal, right? Danielle, remember when she was brand new. And that form, what you have to understand is that form doesn't have to be utilized in such a way that you remove all the contingencies, right? It's designed that you can remove them one at a time, right, Haley? Right? As they come up. So for you brand new people, remember on the contingency. And so what Lisa, when she read the form, she understood it, but it was like, well, they don't have loan approval yet. Right? They have, the appraisal actually came in above the asking price, but they don't have loan approval. And when they wrote the offer, they removed the inspection contingency because again, they're very handy people. Father's a contractor, that type of thing, right? So they were just trying to get the price at a certain point, and they knew they weren't going to get any work done. So when they submitted the offer,
Recording in progress.
they submitted the contingency removal form. But on the contingency removal form, it was just the inspection contingency, not the loan contingency, not the appraisal contingency. Does everybody understand that? Right? That one form handles all the contingencies. The new contract, the reason I'm bringing this up is if you go to the new contract and it's easier for me to see here. If you go to page number two, guys, and you look at contingencies L, right? If you recall, the contingencies were kind of all over the place on the last contract, right? Here, every contingency here, right? So if Lisa had written the contract on this form, it would probably be easier to follow, but it still doesn't remove the responsibility of she as the buyer's agent to get the buyer to sign the contingency removal on the appraisal once the appraisal's done and send it to the listing agent, right? So that's what she did this morning. The other thing that came up, and it comes up all the time, is she said the escrow company contacted me and they said they did it as a favor because the deposit is due today. Where do I get the deposit? Right? I know a lot of you experienced people are like, oh God, was I ever? Yeah, you were. The deposit has to come from the buyer, right? And it goes directly to the escrow company. We don't touch the deposit. They don't make it to eXp Realty of California. They don't make it to you. They make it, they communicate directly with the escrow company, right? And why do they communicate directly with the escrow company in today's world? Well, that's why we don't have a trust account, right? We'll talk about that here in a second. Not bad. The reason being is the old contract was written that the deposit, it defaulted to the deposit being wired in, right? Right?
Yeah.
So let's look at the new contract. Let's look what it says under, on page number 1, initial deposit. Okay, go all the way down to D1, initial deposit amount. You guys can see it on here, right? It asks for the money, and then it says within 3 or blank business days after acceptance by wire transfer or, okay? So it still defaults to a wire transfer. When we write a contract, auto-populates is the concern about wire transfers, right? And if you read that document, what it basically says is, hey, listen, there's a lot of fraud in wire transfers. Don't just be wiring money, right? And when we have more time, I'll tell you a story, the story of how we were the first company that got hit down in LA on that, because they can really confuse people. So the escrow company needs to communicate directly with the buyer as it relates to the deposit, even if the deposit is going to be delivered by personal check or cashier's check, right? But the contract itself calls for a wire. Okay, so if you don't change that, how does the deposit get put into escrow? A wire. So the escrow officer needs to talk to the buyer and say, listen, go ahead and wire the funds. Here's our wiring instructions. It needs to come directly from the escrow officer right after they talk, right? Because otherwise there's people that you know, these scammers that they check for real estate transactions all the time, and they really make it appear as though they are the escrow officer. In other words, they don't portray us, they portray the escrow officer. And they would say, congratulations, Amber, you know, we're so excited to be helping you facilitate the close of escrow. It's now time to wire your funds to our West Coast escrow, because that was the one that got hit down in LA. And here's the wiring instructions. So Amber's all excited. She's going to get her new house, and she wires. In this case, it was $480,000. And she thinks, and then she goes into the escrow officer and signs off. And the escrow officer says, did you bring a cashier's check? Are you going to wire the funds? She goes, oh, I wired him when I got the instructions the other day. And they said, we didn't get any money, right? So that's what happens, right? So you want to not underplay the importance of that wire transfer disclosure. There's a reason it auto populates. Okay, so getting back to Lisa, right? First contract, been in the business a whole, at this point now, 3 weeks, and things are coming up, right? The buyer removed the inspection contingency. So she calls me up and says, else I'm supposed to be doing, right? Danielle, when you don't remove the inspection contingency and you have inspections done, are you pretty busy with inspections? Yeah. So the reason that she wasn't real busy, and I told her, I said, Lisa, the reason that you're not running around with like a chicken with your head cut off right now is because on a country property like you have, you would have had the septic inspection. You would have had the well inspection, right? You would have had the home inspection. You would have had the termite inspection. Your particular buyer, who is experienced in the trades and his father's a contractor, decided they didn't want to, but they went in with full knowledge that the septic system needs to be replaced, right? Which is kind of a challenge, but these folks didn't have, it's a house out in the boondocks somewhere, right? And so that's what happened. But the reason I wanted to talk a little bit about that is because it's real world. It just happened. Haley closed on her own home this week. Congratulations. So Haley reached out to me last week, and there was a request for a seller holdover, right? And originally, I think it was 29 days or less. They countered back. They wanted more.
Yeah, well, their new bill got pushed back, so they asked for more.
Okay, so speak up. So you wrote the offer, and you knew that they wanted to retain possession,
Yeah.
right? And you originally thought it was going to be 29 days or less. So these guys can say what happened.
Yeah, so we wrote it for 29 days, and then they told us actually before they accepted the offer that they needed a little bit longer. Is there any way we could do that? And so we had met them at this point.
Met the sellers, super nice. We just kind of trusted them. So we ended up writing the lease agreement and giving them like 60 days. Right.
Yeah.
So you did it after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were the agent and the buyer. What happens? Why did you originally write it for 29 days or less versus 30 days or more?
So they didn't have like tenant rights in California.
Landlord tenant rights,
Yeah.
right? So the reason that the 29-day or less form is called a licensed to retain possession versus the RLES, which is residential lease,
Yeah.
right? Is because when you give somebody a residential lease, you basically become a landlord, right? 29 days could be construed to be the same way, but what we prefer to hope that it stands if it ever gets tested in court is it's nothing more than an accommodation,
Yeah.
right? We're giving 29 days, say you can stay. And in today's world, believe it, I mean, it's hard for me to believe, but we're seeing more free rent backs than people paying rent, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen them, we just wrote one up in Orange County for 3 months, free rent back. And the guy's house, the new buyer's house payment is $5,600 a month, right? But they really want that. So that happens. Okay, so kind of broke the ice a little bit. And again, the way this works for you new people on the line is it's a workshop. It's not designed to be a classroom type. So put your hand up when you have questions. We'll stop, because if you have a question, I guarantee you somebody around the table has the same question. Okay, so let's get into the purchase agreement. Starting on page 1, pretty easy. And I apologize for you experienced people, because this is going to be like watching paint dry, but it is what it is. Okay, so the new form, you can see California form RPA 12 of 21. All right, this is it. This is 12 of 21. This is the new form. For you guys that are brand new, you don't have to worry about the old one. For the all of us have been around forever, the old form in its state, it went from 8 pages to 10 to 14, has been around to some degree since like the early 90s, right? And then they've modified it over the years. So this one is really a complete change. So let's get into it. It says this is an offer from James Dodge and Holly Dodge. Okay, so this is a simple one. However, okay, Amber has a client, and they say to Amber, so Amber says to them, so Bob and Mary, I'm assuming you're going to buy the home, the two of you. So I'll just use your names. And they say, well, yeah, but we have a trust on the house that we have now in San Jose. We'd like to have this house in trust. And so Amber says to them, well, that makes all the sense in the world. You should have your property in a trust. However, what does she say to them next? When you're purchasing the property as a trust is a entity. So the trust has to qualify for the loan, right? So what you're more than likely going to have to do, Joe and Mary, is buy the house as Joe and Mary Smith and then put it into your trust after the close of escrow. But let me make sure, let me talk to your lender. All right, and if these are conversations that can be happening as you're showing property and that type of thing. When it comes up, well, we have a property in a trust, and say, well, did you buy that property in a trust, or did you place it in a trust? Most people, 90% of the time, you'll find they put it into a trust after. Because the problem is when you're trying to purchase the property as the trust, it's the trust that has to qualify, right?
Is it pretty difficult to qualify? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it creates it creates a whole other realm of necessary procedures for the lenders, whoever the lender is. I don't care if it's Bank of America or Uncle Henry Mortgage, right? Because now it's the trust that's buying the property, not the person. So, and it's not that hard after. Yeah, it's not that hard after, right? Matter of fact, what we've done in the past is we always just have, once we close escrow, we just have the escrow officer that closed it, put it in the trust for us. They don't charge that much. Or you can just take it and to your attorney, and your attorney can do it. They charge more. But really there's no way around that. Okay, so we're only on line number 1, and you can see there's already questions that can come up, right? And so again, Nikki, this is like watching paint dry for you, but for new people, it's not, right? And so then you come down to the property to be acquired is, in this case, 718 High Street. It's in Lincoln, it's in Placer County. There's the zip code, the assessor's parcel number. I didn't put it in. The assessor's parcel number is on, when you start to write an offer, you'll find it. You'll find it in the listing itself, right? However, what's a good practice to get into, Haley, when somebody's interested in a property and you're going to write an offer? It's not really good tool.
Send over the property profile.
Okay. So you'll see, last week you guys had Jan here. She's the rep for Cornerstone. Janine from Old Republic. Kaylee are from Fidelity. All you guys in Southern California, you have reps for escrow and title. Up here, we don't. But you find a rep that you like and you work with, right? And they'll give you, if you guys were in the class last week, they should have given you an app that you can just basically put the property address in. What happens, and Haley is a good example. So Haley's first viable client was looking for a property in Colfax, and she called me, and again, you'd only been in the business for a short period of time. And, what do I do now? And I said, well, the first thing I would do is order a property profile. There's a couple of reasons that I like to use a property profile. Number one, I know what's going on with the property. And number two, for a brand new agent, it really makes you look like right, Haley? It really makes you look like you're spending a lot of time and busting your tail for these guys, right?
Yeah.
And they appreciate the information. So a good habit to get into when you've got somebody you're going to write an offer, because it can all be done electronically now. They can send it over to you. I'm old fashioned, so when I'm getting ready to do something, I have them send it to me. I print it off or whatever. Usually what I do is they send it, I get a PDF, and I just send the PDF to the buyer, right? And then sometimes I'll go through it with them. But what I'm looking for on that property profile is I want to see the loans on the property. It'll show it.
Can you do that prior to writing an offer for the client?
You can do it. So you could literally, if this is the house they want to write an offer on, Amber, you can get into your app or you can call your rep. And by the time you get back from the house to the office, it'll be in your inbox. Okay, they can do it usually that fast. Yeah.
Does the rep can we create it ourselves?
You can create it if you have the app.
Okay,
How many
the
people have been created
Fidelity,
on your app? Did you ever get an app? Did you guys get?
Yeah, well, for Cornerstone, you just have a login and then you can just pull it yourself.
Yeah.
But initially, yeah, Jan was just sending them to me, but
Okay.
way faster when you have a login.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
Download it and send it.
Yeah.
I have Pastor
So,
Title.
yeah. And you use who?
Pastor Title's out.
Yeah, same thing. They all have it.
Okay.
All right. And it works, right?
The login you have to get through Jan, like you have to give you-
Yeah.
Mhm.
just-
Yeah, she'll get it for you. It takes about what, 10 seconds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good practice to have that. So I'm getting ready to write an offer for these people. I ordered the property profile. We've talked a little bit about how they're going to hold title. And so when they go to buy the property, when they go to close escrow, right? The escrow officer, if they haven't done it ahead of time, because usually they'll do it when this statement called an ID statement, they'll ask them how they want to hold title, right? Joint tenants, right? What's the other one? What's the other one?
Community property,
What's that?
community property.
Community property, right? So when they ask you that question, what do you say, Amber? So you're sitting there with them at the sign off and they look at you and they say, hey, well, I don't know. We don't know the difference. What do we do?
Explain the differences between.
We don't, because we're not attorneys. Okay, we don't explain the pluses and minuses between community property, joint tenancy, right? Tenants in common. We
So how
don't.
do we help guide them?
So what happens is before they go in to sign off, right? And I know there's a lot of things to remember, right? Because they can go on the internet and they can search it out and they can get enough information. Most people in California will opt to take joint tenancy, right? Because of right of survivorship, if there's two people. But then it comes back to that whole thing we talked about, right? If they're going to have a trust, right? In California, if you own real estate, you need to have a trust. Right? So I can't tell you how many times we've been involved in transactions here where the people don't have a trust. They have a will, but somebody disputes the will. And I mean, it's just a nightmare, right? If you have more than one child and you're going to leave them property or properties, right? You need to have a trust, right? Because it spells it out really well. So, but again, these are all just things that come up in the real world, right? When you're representing a buyer, they will be asked by the escrow officer, right? Because the escrow officer will not make that decision for them. So you have to kind of get in front of it. Most of the time, they'll just pick one, right? And an escrow officer won't tell them either, but they'll say, well, most people take joint tenancy, right? They'll just, because they want to move on. They don't want to be there signing off, right, Judy? They don't want to sign people off
Right.
for the next 4 hours, right? So they'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we kind of talked about that. We talked about the parcel number. Postal mailing address may be different from the city jurisdiction. Buyers advised to investigate. They got this thing in Beverly Hills, for instance, that it's not necessarily in the Beverly Hills city limits, but they call it the post office, right? It's in the Beverly Hills post office area, right? And so we have to be real careful when we sell houses down there, guys, because the last thing you want to say is it's in Beverly Hills, and it's not Beverly Hills, but it's in the post office, right? So again, this form is a California form. So what you have is those 6, or I don't even know how many people are on standard forms anymore, but those people are there representing a different segment of the state, like I did Silicon Valley, right? They had somebody from San Diego, they have somebody from Orange County, they have somebody from, two people from LA, and then they have somebody way up in the hell in Eureka, right? And so, and all those people will try to get their points across, because for years, and this will help you remember this form, for years in Southern California, they had what they called passive acceptance of contingency removal, which basically meant, guys, this will come up when you run into some old brokers. What basically meant is if you don't say that it's not acceptable to you, it's deemed to be accepted, right? We had active removal of contingencies in Northern California. So we used to always say to them, are you nuts? What happens if you forget? What happens if somebody gets sick, right? I mean, passive, basically, it was written in the contract that if you don't actually say there's a problem with the property, it's deemed acceptance, okay? Up here, it's active. It's always been active. Now across the state, it's active. The reason I'm telling you guys that is what you don't want to do, especially in our OC and San Diego agents, is you don't want to just let the time go by, because sometimes you'll get another old broker on the other side that will forget that you know it actually needs to be removed. It's kind of like going back to Lisa's situation, right? The listing agent says, hey, that contingency needs to be removed tomorrow. She calls me, what am I supposed to do with that? I said, well, we got to remove the contingency, right? Has the appraisal been done? Yes. Did it come in? Yeah, it came in higher. Well, great. It's a great thing. What happens when the appraisal comes in lower? Which is happening in 60% of our sales right now, right? It's a problem. It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Happens that often.
It happens that often right now. And about probably a year from now, it's going to be the other way, right?
So
But right
you
now,
have to come up with more cash down to
Yeah.
like bridge the gap.
yeah, yeah. And that's a class for a different day when we talk about how to write a gap. You know, basically, in essence, Amber, what you do is you say, should the property appraise for less than the purchase price? Or in the event, right? You don't want to say, hey, I know it's going to be less. Should this occur, the buyer agrees to make up the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value, not to exceed $20,000 in an amount not to exceed $20,000, right? So basically, that's what you'll hear people referring to as they were going to cover the gap between $20,000, right? So it's a little more complicated than that, but not much, right? It's basically me telling the seller as a buyer, because we got to remember, we get involved in all this legalese and stuff. Really, the seller just wants to sell her darn house, and the buyer just wants to buy the darn house, right? So we need to keep it as simple as we can. So basically, it's the buyer saying, listen, this thing doesn't appraise. I got another 20 grand. I'll cover up to $20,000 in difference, right? Anything more than that, the deal's off, okay? So back to the contract. Agency. Disclosure. The parties each acknowledge receipt of the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships if represented by a real estate licensee. Buyer's agent is not legally required to give the seller's agent the AD form signed by the buyer. Seller's agent is not legally obligated to give to buyer's agent the AD form signed by the seller. However, below is the confirmation of agency, right? Which is, are you representing both parties, or are you representing the buyer solely and the seller solely, right? So this team, we're called Culbertson and Gray, brokered, powered by EXP. And so you're going to write an offer, Amber, on a listing that is also an EXP broker, but they're not on our team. What is the agency? They're not on our team.
It's still dual agency, just because it's the same broker.
Who is the agent? In real estate law, who's the agent? Broker, EXP, right? EXP Realty Inc. of Northern California is the broker. So that would be dual agency, right? So what I see happening a lot, and I think it's going to happen a lot with this new form, is in the heat of battle, people forget to check the box. That comes up a lot, right? So you guys will send it over to me. The first thing I do is I look to see if you check the right box. Right? And a lot of times the right box isn't checked. So I then send it back to you. You did a good job, except you missed this, this, and that. And usually it's agency. So what happens if we sell a house, Lynette, and we double end it, and we never had the agency contract signed because I've known this guy since high school, and the buyer is also somebody that I've known for a long time, but I never got the agency agreed, but the contract's done, everybody's happy. But the seller's brother is an attorney, and he always was a guy. I never liked him, right? He never liked me. And so when they go to escrow, and the escrow officer calls me ahead of time and said, hey, they instructed me not to pay you a commission.
You don't get a commission.
If you don't have agency signed, the seller is not obligated to pay a commission. Okay. So agency is pretty important, right? Yeah. So we want to make sure that agency's there. It's pretty well explained if you read the agency agreement. The agency agreement, we talked about it last week. I know that Lauren's on the line. Lauren actually had the agency agreement signed prior to getting the listing signed, right? She used that as a trial close. She got them to sign it. She explained to them that in California, it's incumbent upon us as licensees to explain agency. What agency basically means, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is that it could come about that I'm going to be representing you and the buyer, even though the buyer is simply working with another EXP agent from San Jose. But EXP Realty has about 8,500 agents in California right now. So there's a pretty good likelihood that an EXP agent might actually show your property and write the offer. But most of the time, what happens is I'll be representing you exclusively, and the buyer's agent will be representing the buyer exclusively. Now, with that said, right, I have a fiduciary responsibility to you as the seller, but I also have a duty to the buyer of what we call fair and honest dealings, right? So it doesn't excuse me from my obligation to be truthful, but what agency basically says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is that my highest duty is to you unless there's another EXP agent. Now, with that said, the real world, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is I might not even ever meet that other agent. Right. But we're all a part of this big company called EXP Realty of California. Do you understand that?
Mhm.
Right. And I always ask people that. And most of the time they're like, sure. By this time, they're like, oh, yeah, whatever you say. Right. But the point is they have to understand that the more, because we're growing like a weed, right? We're getting a lot more dual agency contracts coming through the door. Right. So we need to keep that in mind. So going down below. So staying with the agency, I forgot this. Okay. So Amber, you're in the hot seat today.
On the line of-
Yeah, you're in the right spot. So Amber writes an offer, and we're all excited because it's listed by Monica behind you, right? And you ladies do the right thing, and you fill out the fact that you're representing both the buyer and the seller. What else should you do in order to make sure that we're completely covered?
Transparent.
Huh?
I said, just to make sure we're transparent.
What's
that we're working
another
together.
document that you can use? Monica? There's a form in your zip forms, confirmation of agency, okay? And it basically says the same thing. It's just a single form. Anytime we double into property, we want to use the confirmation of agency.
So rather than just verbally explaining it to somebody
Well,
where they get
it's-
their acknowledgement on it.
Well, remember, we're already going to have the agents. The first document that auto-populates when you're writing an offer is agency, right?
Right.
Then we do it again here. This is a
Being
whole
redundant,
other
isn't it?
document that you grab and you bring in to the pile, right? It's the confirmation of agency document. And what's happening is more and more attorneys that represent real estate brokerages are advising that you just have double coverage, even though it seems redundant. And just so you know, EXP is going to start requiring it. If they already aren't, they're going to start requiring it in January, right? Because we're getting so damn big.
So they're requiring, the confirmation of agency in next month?
Yeah.
Because I'm in that deal with
Yes,
Sam right
yeah,
now.
yeah, and you guys can just add it. You can add it
Okay, I
now.
was like, I don't think
Yeah,
we did
yeah,
that.
you want to do it up front, obviously, when you can,
Okay.
but it just needs to go in, you know, yeah. Huh?
Why do they need three? That seems so-
It's just because California is such a litigious state, right? And they just want to make it clear, it's not just, matter of fact, it's not just EXP, Coldwell Banker has always required it, right? And really, Coldwell Banker, I think Vicky Nadorf may have been the one that created that form, right? And because agency is such a big deal, right? So, but
What are the three? There's the agency.
Well, there's
form, the
there's this page right here, which is just checking the right box.
And then the agency.
It just auto-populates
And then the
confirmation.
Okay.
So what I want you guys to remember is, hey, if you're selling another EXP thing, you know, I'm going to text, well, as soon as my damn phone starts working again, I'm going to text Jeff and I'll just say, it's right here. This is the one you want, right? Okay. All right, so let's continue down. Buyer and seller referred to parties, brokers and agents are not parties to this agreement. Okay, so I'm trying to think of who was, Kelly. So Kelly sold this house to these people, and I think that they're hell bent on doing nothing, but either they should adopt Kelly or I don't know, but they call her every day on something. This house was sold months ago, right? And there's always something wrong. And so I said, you know, what you need to let them know, because there is actually a legitimate concern on this one involving non-disclosure. And I said, but what you have to let people know is our agency relationship ends when? At close of escrow. At close of escrow. Technically, that's when our agency relationship ends. Yeah, that's legally. The real world is if one of your clients calls you up, you know, and complains about something, you know, we obviously are service oriented because we got to get that 5-star Zillow review, right? And so, but technically, agency ends at the close of escrow. Okay, so this sentence that's put in there is that you'll find it probably 3 or 4 more times in the contract, which basically says we are not a party to the agreement, right? We're simply a facilitator. We get paid a fee to bring the parties together, but we are not a party to the agreement. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So we can't be making decisions when all of a sudden we send out a counter and another offer comes in and it's 20,000 more and it's all cash. We can't just call the first buyer up and say, hey man, I'm revoking that off. You still have to go through the motions. You have to get a hold of the seller, because invariably, if you watch what's going to happen, you think you're doing the right thing for the seller, you call them up and they're going to say, but we like those people. We don't like these people. And you're going to say, but it's 20,000 more. And they're going to, we don't care. You call those people back. We want those people. You know, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but if you know, you don't really know ridiculous until you start selling real estate. So then you come down, you can see the confirmation, the seller's brokerage firm, eXp Realty of California, Inc. You can see when this is just an example, I pulled my name, my phone, my number, Oaks Realty, their number, I doctored their number up, by the way. And same thing, Julie is the agent on the other side. Then it says is blank check, the buyer's agent. So nothing was checked here, right? In this case, guys, when I countered the offer, if I would have countered the offer, what would I have had to do? I left it blank on purpose because it's a test. Okay. If this is why it's kind of a you know what, if it's not checked, you can't just counter back to the buyers through the buyer's agent that regarding item number 2, agency confirmation, buyers and sellers agree to check the appropriate boxes. Again, Joni, that's when the agency confirmation form has to be used, right? Because what you do is you make that form a part of the agreement per the counter. Does everybody understand that?
You send that form
With the counter. You can't just say you got to check the right box, right? Because that modifies what they already wrote. Does everybody understand? Well, the reason we use a counter back in the old days, believe it or not, I know you guys are going to laugh. We used to just cross out the purchase price and put the new purchase price down and they would initial it, right? I mean, I'm going back to the late 80s. Yeah. Now, an attorney got a hold of that and said, this is just bull. And he was right? And so that's why everything has to happen via counter. You can't just say, hey, you know, you dummy, you forgot to check the right box, right? You got to, that's where the agency confirmation form comes in, right? And you send it back with the counter. Everybody gets that? Okay. So now with the new counter offer form, there's a little box on the bottom that says other. In this case, you're going to hit that little box and you're going to put in there what? Agency confirmation, right? That's a part of the counter offer. Does everybody remember that? We looked at that this morning, the new counter offer, right? It actually has some of the addendas that go. We used to have forever, we wrote those in Now they have a little box that you can check. Okay. So there's that. Okay. More than one brokerage represents seller, buyer, see additional broker acknowledgement. In some marketplaces, particularly high-end marketplaces, Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Malibu, San Francisco, it's not unusual for a seller to say, I like you, but you're at XYZ and I really want them involved. I like you and you're at XYZ and I really want your company involved. I'd like to give you the listing and I'd like you guys to share the listing, right? It happens a lot in Beverly Hills. And so this form basically says, if that's what you're going to do, Lori, you have to have that acknowledged, right? And this is a purchase agreement, right? In this case, it's the buyer that have to acknowledge that the buyer is being represented by two brokerages, right? On the new listing agreement, it's also going to have a spot for that. I think it already does, Jason, where you can have two different firms representing the seller. This is where the buyer is going to be represented by two different firms, right? Which is different than a referral fee being paid to somebody that refers you, the buyer. So what does this create? Really confusing, because who's going to do the audit, right? If there's a problem, which firm is most responsible? Who's going to be communicating? You guys are with us. Yeah, you can have remember in the world here, if everybody at this table decides to work together and sell one buyer, right? It's still eXp Realty of California, Inc., right? What they're talking about is it's eXp Realty of California, Inc. is going to represent the buyer as well as Century 21 Haley, right? And
two avids and you each sign. Yeah. I mean, that's what I think.
Yeah. So the reason I'm bringing this up is try not to get into that mess, right? Because it is a mess, right? Where is it happening a lot?
High-end.
High-end. And how has it shown its ugly head in our market? Hey, Danielle. Danielle. Yeah. This is Joe Welch. I'm an agent in San Jose. I have clients that really, I've been trying to get into something. I can't find them something. We've written 4 or 5 offers. How would you like to split them with me? And Danielle says, well, I don't know. I've never done that before. Why don't I just pay you a referral fee? And he says, well, that's fine, but my referral fee is 50%. Daniel says, you're right. Let's split them because he doesn't want to do all the work and everything and give the guy 50%. That's where it's coming in, right? We've been able to dodge that for the most part, but we've had a couple, and it's just what happens, right? So that's been added to the form. Then down below, potentially competing buyers and sellers, the parties, and this is a form, Amber, Lori, I'm sorry, what was your name? Valencia? Okay, we're gonna have to call you Val. I'm never gonna get that one down. Val. So this form here, this part of the contract that says potentially competing buyers and sellers. The parties each acknowledge receipt of the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. Who is the agent? eXp Realty of California. That document auto-populates, right? Why does it auto-populate? It happens when if you're going to write a contract, you get into zip forms, you bring up the RPA, it auto-populates because we don't want you to forget it, right? And the reason, and it's not eXp, it's California Association of Realtors. The reason being is Lynette is a sub-agent of eXp Realty of California, right? And so am I, and so are you, right? And so what that advises and shares with the buyer and the seller is there is a chance that the offers on this property may be represented by another eXp agent, right? Does everybody understand that? So that's why that document has to be included. So here's a question. It happens once in a while. We had it happen about 6 months ago. It might have been Haley. No, it wasn't Haley. Was it you that was going to write an offer for the two buyers on the same house that wanted to know if you could? Okay. And what did I tell you?
You can't represent.
Okay. So it's It's two,
Yeah.
it's two different buyers that wanted to write an offer on the same damn house, right? And I told her, you can't do that, right? You can't do that. Yeah. So the reason, so Val, as the newest person here, so what happened, Haley was sitting in your seat not that long ago. So she's all excited. She gets two different buyers looking at the same property and they both want to write an offer on it. So she says, what do I do? And I said, well, you cannot represent both of them. You have to refer one of them to somebody else, right? Because there's no way that you can fairly represent two people, knowing the terms, knowing the hot maximum price and everything else. Now, that's different than if you have a listing and you find a buyer for it, right? So when you have a listing and you find a buyer for it, what do we do?
You tell them.
Tell them, you're new to the class, you're not new to the business, you're new to the class. You call me, right? And you say, hey, I'm writing an offer on my listing. And I say, great. Once you get it together, let's get a hold of the seller. I'll go through the offer with the seller, right? Because even though it's dual agency, we're on the same team and everything else, what do we want involved? A different voice, right? We want them to let them know, I've never met the buyer, right? The reason I'm presenting this offer to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, okay, is because Terry was fortunate. She did a great job. She did what she told you she was going to do. She went out and found a buyer for you, right? But I want to make sure that everything is clearly explained to you. Not that Terry can't do it, but she doesn't want it to appear that she's trying to maybe sway you one way or the other. So I'm going to go through the facts of the offer with you, Mr. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. And then if it works out and we can somehow come to terms, we'll do our best to get this transaction closed for you. And then he says, well, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, 6%. I mean, you guys found the buyer and everything. I say, well, you know what, Mr. Seller, I didn't want to bring this up, but usually when we find the buyer ourselves, because our sellers are pretty pleased with what we've done, we usually get a bonus. But I wasn't going to bring that up. And they just usually shut right up, right? But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Okay, when I was young and I used to double into a lot of properties, I had to learn something, right? Does it work every time? No, but at least I tried, right? I usually get a bonus, but potentially
Hey, Jeff,
sellers. Everybody understands that, right? Nicole, Lori, Haley. So it's not you that might have another buyer. It's EXP that might have another buyer. We need to disclose to our buyer that EXP may be showing a buyer for the same property. It may be a competing buyer, right? Okay. So we go down to the next terms of purchase and allocations of cost. Okay.
Jeff,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
can I hold you up just for one quick second?
Yes.
I went to get some water and I missed C, 2C. What do we do there at 2C?
Hold on a second. Somebody's helping me here. So hold on, Judy. I recognize your voice. There she is right there. So say that again.
On agency 2C.
Two,
Yeah.
more than one brokerage represents seller. Oh yeah, you went to get some water. What that's for, Judy, is when like in high-end markets like LA, particularly Beverly Hills, they'll have two agencies representing the seller. In other words, we'll split the listing, right? It's very rare that a buyer, but a seller is, and I would say in high-end markets on properties over 10 million in Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Santa Monica, Malibu, I'll bet you it's 30% of the time it's two different agencies representing the seller.
Oh, okay.
It's common, yeah.
All right.
And some of you people in Southern California might know the number better than me, but that's what I think it is.
So we don't have to do anything. For
No,
that.
no,
Okay,
you don't have
thank
to.
you.
That's only if that's happening. Okay, so
I
it's
get
listed by Center 21 and Red Carpet.
Okay.
So, okay, good question. All right, so we get down to the terms, right? And it says, okay, this is something new, guys. Terms of purchase and allocation cost. The items in this contractual terms of the agreement, reference paragraphs provide further explanation. This form is 16 pages. The parties are advised to read all 16 pages. So the way it happens, Val, in today's world, which as people that have been in the class know before is a pet peeve of mine, is we find a house, everybody's excited. The buyer, they want to offer, we talked to them a little bit about, they've been pre-approved. We know how much they're going to put down. We talked to them a little bit about allocations of cost, probably not enough. We talked to them a little bit about the pluses and minuses of a home warranty. They could waive the home warranty. If it's a rural property, we talk about why they need to get a septic inspection, why they need to get a well inspection. We talk about all those things. It's 10:05 in the morning. We go back to the office, we type it up by 11 o'clock. We send it to them, DigiSign or DocuSign, right? We send it to them at 11 o'clock. It comes back at 11:03, fully signed,
Yeah.
right? 3 minutes. It's 16 pages plus all the addendums. So they're probably looked over 25, 26 pages of documents, right? So how are we going to defend our position when it hits the fan someday and the buyer says, well, I really didn't understand what I was selling? The real staunch people in the audience will always say, well, that's their problem, right? It says in the contract, they're supposed to know what they're signing. But this is California, right? And at one point I had 7 or 8 states that I oversaw. 99% of the lawsuits that were in my region happened in California, not just because of population, but because it was California, right? So what Judy, you're still there.
Yeah.
Touch on that a little bit for me.
I'm
About
sorry.
people reviewing the documents
Yeah.
and signing it back in 3 minutes. Here's
Would it be our job to highlight some of the key points to make sure they understand, or is that not our job?
Here's something that I'm going to suggest, okay? And I know it's hard. One of the things that I think you're working a buyer, Nicole's like already closed a couple dozen deals, right? Or maybe 3. And so she's obviously good with the buyers, right? She's obviously good with the buyers. And it's maybe it's gift of gab or whatever it is. But at what point do you think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a copy of the contract when you're showing houses and give it to people and say, by the way, this is the contract we're going to use when we finally make an offer on a property, right? Why not need to use it today? Easier said than done. I get the real world because this is what happens. Nicole gets the chime lead. She goes out and shows them. They want to write it up. She knows them for an hour. What is she going to say? No. You got to wait until I explain the goddamn contract to you, right? What she wants to say then is, what I'd really like to do is kind of go through what I think are the most misunderstood aspects of the agreement, right? So the challenge that we have, and I get it, there's competitive pressures, and then there's the other side that we're talking about in this class, which is the legal concerns, is there is no way in hell that somebody that hasn't bought a house in 7 years we're going to be able to convince anybody that they understood what they were signing when they had the document for 7 minutes, right? So what I think is not a bad idea is as you're speaking to people, right? And you have a good conversation going. So Monica's talking to people and she's showing them houses, and she's at some point you make some assumptions. I don't like assumptions, but you need to make some. These people like Monica. They're going to work with Monica, right? Monica's ordering property profiles on the properties. What prohibits Monica from sending them a little note saying, by the way, the contract just changed in California. It used to be 10 pages. It's now 16. We're finding that a lot of people have a lot of questions on it. I hope you don't mind, but I attached it via PDF, right? And I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to spend 15 or 20 minutes on the phone talking about it. They might not call you, but at least you send it to them, right? And it also gives you something else to what? To discuss, to talk about, to be different, because the other guy that showed him a house from Century 21, all he said was, sign twice, push hard, the second copy is yours, right? We don't want to be that way. We want to be service providers, right? And so again, it's 16 pages, guys, 16 pages, right? When I started, it was 1 page, right? It's 16.
Yeah, 1 page.
Yeah, I mean, that's 1978, right? 1 page. So
Taking it with me on the listing presentation.
you should be taking it on the listing presentation. Yeah. One of the things that we didn't get into that on last Tuesday, when we do the next listing presentation class, we'll talk about that. When I would do listing presentations, when I knew I was competing against other brokers, I always brought the contract with me. I always brought the contract. And years ago, I actually had a thing written up, and I'll try and write it again when I find time, is the 10 most misunderstood aspects of the California purchase agreement, right? And then I would bring that out with me and I'd highlight it and I'd share it with them. I would ask my question, why do you think real estate transactions fall out of escrow? People would say, I don't know. And I'd say, there's a lot of reasons, Amber. But one of the reasons I think that transactions actually fall out of escrow is I think a lot of buyers obligate themselves to something that they don't completely understand, right? Or at least understand to some degree. In addition to that, Amber, I know a lot of times sellers will just sign a contract when it comes in because they're so excited about what I call the first page. And the first page is the offering price, how much they're putting down, and the deposit. But the contract is 16 pages. So what I like to do with the people that I work with, Amber, is before that happens, is I like to go through with probably 10 or 11 items, maybe a few more that I think are misunderstood. Like what happens if the buyer defaults? And you get them to ask questions. And that's because what we're trying to do on a listing presentation is kind of like what Lauren did, right? They already liked Lauren, right? That's the number one thing, that they like you and trust you, right? But then it's also sharing with them that, hey, I didn't just fall off a truck. I kind of know what I'm doing here, right? And you can't really just say that. You have to demonstrate that. And how we demonstrate that is by sharing knowledge of what? Of the mechanics. The mechanics are how we write contracts, how we make sure that contingencies are met. We talk about the word contingency. I tell people all the time, the most important word in this now 16 pages of contract is the word contingency, right? And I explain that to both the sellers and the buyers, because I tell people all the time at this little house here that I sold, it was actually my aunt's house. So I was working with my cousin. I told my cousin, I said, do not pop the champagne. Right? Not until the contingencies are removed. We got to get an appraisal. We got to get this person approved, and we're going to give them inspections. She goes, well, a friend of mine said that you didn't have to give inspections. I said, your friend is right, but here's why we're going to give inspections. Because Aunt Marceline is 94 years old. She's sitting over there in Lincoln Meadows, right? And nothing's been done to this house, right? So her disclosure, she hasn't seen the house in 20 years. It's not adequate. We want the buyers to walk in with their eyes fully open. Because I don't want to be going over to Lincoln Meadows in 2 years telling Aunt Marceline, hey, attorney just called me, right? So you want to, there was an article in Inman recently that talked about, from an attorney, talking about why the inspection should be more valuable to the seller than the buyer, right? Because what's the number one reason for lawsuits in California? Non-disclosure, right? So, okay. Speak up so they can hear you. We got a lot of people online.
I had something come up yesterday where I had a buyer that we had inspections done and we ended up pulling out of the deal because the inspections had too many findings that were not good.
Concerning.
Yeah. And my buyer said, he messaged me when we got the inspection report and just said, hey, if the seller wants to purchase these from me, I would be happy to sell them to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never had anybody say that to me before.
Mm-hmm.
And I had previously told the listing agent because she asked me if I would share those with her. And I said, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Once I get them, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got that message from my client saying, I'll let him have them if he buys them. Well, then we saw in the contract under section 12B, I think it was.
12B.
And in the new one, I
The old
think it's
contract.
D. Yeah, the old contract.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's D. But it says that you, as the buyer, do you have any inspections done? If the seller requests them, you have to give them at no cost. And I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
anyway.
it's a great point, right? When you have the inspections done, part of the reason is in a lot of things like that have occurred more recently because of disclosure laws, right? Because how many years back should a seller disclose repairs or inspections to a buyer? 3 years at least, right? And so what happens is if the property was sold 3 years ago and there was a termite report done, there was property inspection done, we should give that property inspection and that termite inspection to the buyer, right? And so when this first came up, I actually talked to one of the attorneys at CAR who I've known for years, and I said, so what's up with that? He said, well, like he always used to tell me, it's California. And the other thing though is the buyer probably has a right to know what happened then, and was it addressed? Was it fixed? Was it replaced? You know, were parts of what happened with all this, right? Peggy Arif, who's one of the best agents I've ever worked with, had a situation. What Peggy does
Let me go get Peggy.
property,
Thank you, those
is again, she's trying to demonstrate to her clients that she just didn't fall off a truck. Is she pulls listings for the property and she'll go back 10 years. She'll try, because what's the likelihood that a property has been listed and sold in our area within 10 years? Pretty good. Pretty good, right? She'll pull up the old listing and she'll see what they say at it. She'll go through that with her buyer, right? Because she's trying to do what? She's trying to demonstrate to them that she's doing her homework, right? She has the property profile, she pulls the old listing, plus the new listing. She tries to find out if there's any. And by the way, congratulations, Lauren. Lauren convinced her clients to have inspections done ahead of time, right? So anyway, yeah. So anyway, the thing that we were talking about with Peggy having research done on the property herself, how long does it take to pull an old listing? Not very long. You just search it and it pops up, right? You just set the time back and it pops up. What she does is she takes the whole listing out. What she finds on there that she seems that is, she'll just give them the listing, but she'll highlight where it said storage shed in the back to be torn down, oak tree will be, replaced, stuff like that, right? And it may not matter, but again, what we're trying to do in our industry all the time, because it's very competitive, so we're trying to be just a little bit better than everybody else, right? All right. So let's continue down. All right. I apologize. I'm going as fast as I can here. Purchase price, pretty simple, right? What are they going to offer? So for you new people, all right. So I get calls all the time. Hey, I'm trying to figure out what the rest of the down payment is. And I'll say to you, did you put the deposit in yet? Did you put the loan amount in yet? And invariably you'll say, well, no, I haven't done that. And I say, once you put the deposit amount in and you put the loan amount in, the rest will auto-populate, right? And then the question is, how do I know what the loan amount is going to be, right? And I say, well, what kind of financing is your client getting? And by the way, when you were talking to the loan officer 15 minutes ago, what did she say? And invariably what you'll say is, I haven't talked to the loan officer. And I'll say, you've got to call the loan officer because I don't know how to answer your question until I know what they're going to be putting down and what they're. The new contract, what they have in here, we're going to get into it in a second, is they actually break down for the benefit of our sellers, the three different ways that a buyer has been approved, pre-qualified, or approved with some of the backup done, right? So we're going to talk about that here in a second. So the purchase price, pretty simple, right? Let's just say it's $700,000, right? And then if it's all cash, you have to hit that little box over there. Most of the time it's not. Close of escrow, it can either be days or it can be a date, right? I like a date, but you can't really do a date now because dates are, it's real simple. If you put down there January 16th, by God, it's going to be January 16th. But if you put in there 30 days, right? And there's 4 offers on the property, and it goes back a couple counters back and forth, and we're sitting here and we don't have what we call a meeting of the minds until Monday, right? It's 30 days from Monday. But the problem is your buyers who don't buy houses every day still think it's 30 days from the day that the offer was written. They don't understand it's 30 days from the final counter offer agreement of the terms, right? So that's one of the things that I would tell you. It's happened twice. Yep, somebody's having fun. So my point is, what happens, guys, is you will write the offer. You have a first-time buyer. They don't know what they're doing. They're counting on you. It said 30 days when the offer was written, right? And for whatever reason, you get busy in the battle, Lori, and you forget that you're talking about contingency removals and everything else, and you forget that they think it's going to close 30 days from today. They don't know it's going to close 30 days from the final counter offer, right? And the experienced agents are kind of going, oh, doesn't matter. Believe it or not everybody understands that, right? So it's the 30 days, guys, is when the final counter offer is agreed to. That's when the timeline starts. It also is the timeline for contingency removal periods, right? So everybody understands that. So we go down to expiration of offer. This used to be on page number 9. It's now up front where it always should have been. It basically says exactly what the word expiration means, is if I don't hear something back from the seller within this specified time, I'm not obligated to purchase the house. Everybody understand that? Okay, that's a pretty easy one, right? Expiration. Initial deposit. What's the difference between an initial deposit and an increased deposit? The initial deposit is what you make with the offer. The increased deposit is what you put in after a period of time.
I have never.
98% of the time, and that's why I brought it up for the new people. 98% of the time, guys, there's only an initial deposit. Every now and then you run into Mary Smith, who got her license in 1978, and she wants the deposit to be increased to 3% when you remove the contingencies, right? And when you do that, it's not as simple as just putting the additional money into escrow. There's another document that has to be created, right? And the reason for that other document is it incorporates liquidated damages into the additional deposit as well as the initial deposit. So what's the best way to write an offer so that you don't have to worry about all that crap? Put a 2% deposit up, or put a Cameron.
One time I've used it is when your seller is selling the house, and they don't have the funds to do a full 3%.
Okay,
So then once we close, we did
they're going to close their house first before they close this one. You could do something like that.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah. So
right.
That's the one time because we only did it because the agent was very picky.
Yeah, you ran into Mary, Mary that got her license in 1978, right? Yeah, I mean, I got my license in 1978, and I won't do that to you guys because I think a deposit is a deposit, right? The other form is, it's actually there. It's called the, I think it actually has it written down on there, SIP or DID. Yeah, yeah. If you write that in the original contract, yes, it does. Yeah, it auto-populates, right? But the problem is, what happens is most of the time, the increased deposit comes in the form of the seller's counter. The counter usually counters back saying, hey, deposit is to be increased to 3% upon contingency removals, right? They don't, but they should be. Yeah.
So if they don't, then you just.
Yeah, because remember what it basically refers to is liquidated damages. So liquidated damages, and this is a misnomer. Everybody thinks liquidated damages covers every purchase, right? It does not cover non-owner purchases. So if somebody's buying it for a rental and it says it right there in the liquidated damages, it only covers purchases of 1 to 4 units, of which one of the units is going to be occupied by the purchaser, right? But that form is what states that the 3% is the maximum. So let me ask you a question. You represent an investor and he really wants a house and it's 700,000. He says, I'll put 10% down as a deposit. Can he put $70,000 down as a deposit? Put anything you want down. Can the seller go after the 70,000 if he defaults?
No.
But he's not a.
Even if it doesn't apply to them.
Misnomer. If it's not covered by liquidated damages, right? So I don't have that part of the contract with me. But that may be a little test for you guys. I don't think I have it in here today. So I want you guys to read liquidated damages because that's the only way I find anybody ever remembers the damn thing, right? Technically, it says right there that 3% is the maximum deposit that can be held by the seller in case of a default, right? With liquidated damages. But if it's not liquidated damages, they could go after actual damages. Right, right. Because see, what happened was the way that the seller used to have to get a deposit from a buyer is they had to prove damages, right? And trying to prove damage, well, I lost the house that I was trying to buy in Sacramento because you didn't buy my house. So that's like at least 10 grand. And then, they had to go through all that, right? So they came up with this thing called liquidated damages instead of actual damages. And so your deposit is at risk if you default based on the amount you put down, not to exceed 3% on an owner-occupied purchase of 1 to 4 units, right?
What if it's not owner occupied?
Then I think you can go after the whole deposit because it's not covered by liquidated damages. But why would you put that much deposit down? right? It's not going to help you get your offer through. Put 3%, right? So the reason I'm bringing that up is if you have a client that says that, say, listen, it really isn't going to make, it's not going to get you the deal by putting, it's the terms. It's the fact that you're putting 50% down that's going to get you this offer. The deposit has very little to do with it, other than the fact that it shows that you're serious. How many times in California do you think the seller gets the buyer when a deal falls through? Very, very rare, because we have that big word in there. Contingency, right? And so I can't tell you how many times I'll talk to people and they'll say, well, but the buyers didn't really try. Well, yeah, it does say, as it relates to the loan, that the buyers to do their best to get the loan. How are you going to prove that?
So
Right.
For like an investor, just so that I make sure I understand. If you're an investor or you have an investor that's purchasing a property and not going to occupy it, their earnest money, once you remove everything, they have no liquidity.
Well, same thing with a non-investor. Once you remove your contingencies, your deposit's always at risk. Yeah. Yeah. Jason, any comment on that? Been doing this a long time. Yeah.
You should always advise your clients not to put more than 3%.
I would never put more than 3. And the reason being is kind of commonplace. I mean, 3% is a lot of deposit. We're not selling $200,000 houses anymore, right? I mean, that's a lot of money. And so it's kind of what everybody's used to. 3 deposits, 3% is a good deposit.
Yeah. Like, quick question about that being like on the listing side, like, what is the point of an E&D besides a good faith deposit?
Nikki's asked me that many times, right? Yeah, yeah. In California, it's
I've had agents want 3% or agents don't care if it's 1%.
yeah, yeah. If it's me, I as long as I see 1% or more, I'm good with it, because I know the likelihood of my sellers going through all the crap in this market to try and get that deposit is next to nil, right? And so what you're really trying to do is you're trying to vet the buyer ahead of time to make sure you have a good buyer. A lot of it, when you're looking at an offer coming in, how long has the buyer been in the process? You know, what's the approval date on their loan, right? On the letter. I mean, did they just start like last night, or have they been looking for like 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 months? Jason?
I think it's more relevant when you have the lower end homes. You've got a down payment assistance and they're coming in with barely 1%. You're like, what's going to happen when we get a request for repairs too? Like, you're not gonna
That's my FHA buyer, you can only put 2,000 down.
So
Yeah.
if somebody does have 2% or 3%, even, which is heard of,
Mhm.
at least you know, okay, they got the cash in the bank day one. There's not going to be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all kinds of things, but and Nikki asked me this a long time ago, Jason's right. I mean, in California, it's so hard to get a deposit. It has to be an out and out default. I mean, they literally have to be like 2 days before the close of escrow, and they just change their mind, send an email saying they changed their mind, and actually say, tell them to keep my deposit. It's almost that bad, right? Yeah, they can't perform, they lose their job or whatever, right?
I mean, the buyer can still get their deposit back.
Not necessarily, but that's not the right way to phrase it. The way to phrase it is the seller can still give the buyer their deposit back.
I had one where the buyer couldn't perform because he ended up being married. And they couldn't quick him off because she left family. Anyways, the seller had basically performed to the expectation of their request, doing $5,000 worth of plumbing work. And then, so they're like, well, we're keeping the deposit because of the work that we did for you to be able to close escrow.
Yeah, and that's all dependent upon, was the contingency removed or not? Yeah, and once the contingencies are removed, Nick, you're pretty much, you're there,
Okay.
right?
I was under the impression that the buyer could still get it.
Yeah, that most of the time, if they just dig their heels in and say, then, I'll just, you're gonna resell the house? I'm still trying to get the loan. I'm gonna go to a different lender, right? Because the buyer is at least making an effort. That's a big thing, right? They're making an effort. So the seller says, well, I've got 16 other buyers for the damn thing. Let's screw it. And let's just move on, right? When the market changes, that might be a little bit different, right? So what?
The EMD can still be
Pushed aside.
Yeah, pushed aside while the seller goes back and remarkets the house.
Yeah, but
so the seller's like, well, whatever, I'm gonna get this for contract.
Hey, Jeff,
yeah, Judy.
I have a question that you could give the people that are newer and
What's that?
see. Okay, say you come down to 2 days before closing, buyer has put their down payment into escrow as well as their deposit.
Right?
And then another home comes on the market and they decide, oh my gosh, I want that home over this home. And they back out of the deal.
They back out. Have they removed the contingencies?
Yeah, they've removed the contingencies. So what happens to all that money they've got now in escrow? You might ask your newbies if they know what would happen.
Well, the problem is once the money goes in escrow, it takes both people to release it.
Right, but not if it's a down payment for a loan. That has to be released and go back to the buyer.
It's supposed to, but if you talk to most escrow companies, they won't release funds until both parties agree. And it's kind of like the escrow company has the ability per the agreement, the contract, to pay the deposit to whichever party if the other party doesn't respond to a request for some type of an agreement as to, how it's going to be dispersed. But no escrow company I know ever does that. So what Judy,
Well, it happened to me once.
and so what did you guys do?
Deposit for the loan had to be returned to the buyer.
The down payment.
The down payment had to be returned to the buyer because
Mhm.
that was not, it was not covered under liquidated damages.
Correct.
Because that was not the initial deposit.
Right. So there is no doubt with your story that the buyer would get that money back. But what Judy's talking about is what happened was they went ahead and put all their money into escrow, right? But they other house they like better. They said, we don't want to close on this one. We want that one. But they have all their money already in escrow. But obviously they were purchasing it to live in, right, Judy?
Correct.
And the 3% rule came into play. Right? So they could only be held, the 3% is the maximum that they could be hit on. So the other monies were going to go back to them.
Right.
It's just how quickly they were going to get it back.
Right.
Okay. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of one-offs out there that happen. But once the buyer removes the contingencies, they better be pretty sure that this is the house they want to buy. Right.
Right.
So, okay, guys, what time is it? It's 12:20. When you get into your purchase agreements, because we're going to start next week where we left off, look at liquidated damages and read it.
Are you still going to have the meeting on Wednesday next week?
Oh, no, I forgot. It'll be after. You're right.
Okay.
I forgot Christmas. Those damn holidays, Judy, get in my way.
I know it. Get in the way.
Yeah. My wife says, you got to remember it is Christmas. But anyway, so when we're back together again, we'll do that. The other thing is after the first year, we're going to finish the listing presentation class. Because I think a lot of people got a lot out of that. People are actually using it. So
is that
makes me feel good.
recorded? Is the listing presentation recorded?
Yeah. Danielle recorded it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So get all to Danielle if you guys want that. Yeah, Nikki.
So if you have on the mediation arbitration page, do they still need to sign that if they're at, never mind.
Yes, they do.
If you have an investor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what basically the contract calls for is mediation, right? And then arbitration. If you go to an attorney, they'll usually try to get it set aside. Then the other attorney on the other side will compel the parties to abide to the contract, and you go through mediation, go through arbitration. If that doesn't work, then you go to Superior Court, right? Most attorneys. So if you ever sell a house to an attorney, a lot of times they won't sign it because they don't want to limit their opportunity for what they called it for discovery. Okay. So I used to work with a lot of attorneys; they wouldn't sign it.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And is that a detriment to the seller? Like, would the seller be like, well, have you ever had a seller say, sorry, we're not going to do that?
We've had sellers counter back that they have to initial it. The buyer has to initial it if they want to do business with them. Yeah. Well, they just want to make sure it's easier. It's a lot less expensive, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, most of the time, as you guys all know, when we've done hundreds of transactions, we'll usually work things out. I mean, every now and then it hits the fan, but sometimes people write checks just to be done with things, right? It's very, very rare where, I mean, that deal you and Danielle had, that was a seller that just lied, right? I mean, that's on him, right? So there's nothing we can do about that. So, all right, guys, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jeff.
Right?
Contract,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Hold on, Jude.
Because this one is available.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
So
then
you
they
can write
have
it on
to
this one.
practice
Yeah,
on the new one.
yeah, it's a good idea. Matter of fact, I'll do that to everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. Hey, Judy.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it's Lauren. I'm trying to
Oh,
get.
hey, Lauren.
Hi.
You guys kind of sound alike on my computer.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
So I have the house that I have in escrow right now.
Right.
The septic and the well they have no reports that have been done.
Mhm.
And my buyers are worried about all of the out of pocket that they're paying for like home and pest and for repairs. And they are saying that they don't want to do the septic and well inspection because they're worried that if something falls through, that they would have just done this test and, pretty much for the seller's convenience. I mean,
Right.
how should, obviously it's their choice, but I'm kind of worried. I mean, the septic hasn't been inspected and, there's just no documentation. So they
Right.
could get in there and have a really big issue.
Yeah, the challenge is, what I always tell buyers is, once you enter into the contract, it's basically a two-way street. And I always tell them, you have to look at it from both sides. You as the buyer, I understand why you don't want to spend that money. But if you're the seller, what you're basically saying is, okay, I trust you. I know you're going to, get a loan. I know the property is going to get appraised. And for that, I'm going to take my home off the market. All right. And in return, you need to do everything, your diligence to procure the loan and any inspections that you want. However, I also understand when a buyer buys a property, like you're talking about, Lauren, because the septic, if you use the septic addendum, the seller has to pay for the septic to be pumped. And then the buyer pays for the actual inspection.
Oh.
On the septic addendum, read through the septic addendum that you attach to your offer. And
Okay.
it takes that in there, okay? And
Okay.
yeah, and then the other thing is on the well, you want to have a well inspection done because the last thing you want to do is get in there and find out that there's no water.
yeah. Jeff,
Yep.
what happened that the sellers don't provide that anymore? They used to always provide
The
all
market,
those
the market,
inspections.
the market got so crazy.
Yeah.
Judy, we have buyers paying the county transfer tax. We have buyers paying all
Yeah.
escrow and title
Yeah.
fees.
Right.
I mean, it's just crazy.
I
It's
get
crazy.
all that, but I mean, it's like, these people that live out on land, the sellers used to always have all those reports prior to even putting it on the market.
Yeah, and it comes back to what we spoke about, in this class 30 minutes ago, is if I'm the seller, I want those inspections done.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if I listed something out in the country, I would have the seller do all those reports up front and then put it as part of the listing that
Yeah.
the buyer is to reimburse
Yeah,
at close of escrow for the reports that have been done by the seller. At least then everything's up front. And
yeah. Well, not just that, but in this market, you could do that, right?
yeah,
In a normal market, it's just kind of assumed that the seller is going to provide on a country
yeah,
those two reports.
kind of can't wait
Things
to
have
get back
changed.
to the normal market.
Yeah, this one's crazy. So Lauren, there isn't a magic wand or magic words to give you other than, listen, you really don't want to be buying a property in the country not knowing that your septic works because, going back to Lisa's deal, right? I mean, there's $26,000 worth of work on that septic system that her client
That's
buying.
expensive.
Yeah.
So that addendum that you said needed to be added to the offer, is that what you said?
Yes, it would have been in the offer when you wrote the offer, the septic, if there was a septic,
It's in there already. I didn't have to add it.
if you hit the button that says septic inspection on page number 2, it would have populated for you.
Okay, I don't think I did.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, and obviously I don't know all the properties, so I didn't know it had a septic. Otherwise I would have told you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just try and convince them otherwise.
Yeah, they need to get it done and call the listing agent and talk to the listing agent, say, listen, we really need to get this septic done. And, we need the sellers to pump it and then my buyers will pay for the inspection.
Okay. Okay, I'll see what I can do. Thank you.
All right, who's the listing agent? What company?
It's actually EXP. His name is Ed Lenzer.
Okay, I'm surprised, as Judy said, I'm surprised he already didn't have it done.
Yeah, well, it
Oh.
was a trustee sale, so.
Yeah,
You know, these agents don't do anything upon listings anymore. I
not
mean,
anymore.
they-
I mean,
It's amazing. They don't even have their disclosures together. The listing agent hasn't even done their AVID. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like they're so lazy with everything, I find. And
Yeah.
I just go, get
It's-
it all
it's-
done up front. It takes no time at all, and then it's done.
It's indicative of the market. It's just crazy.
Oh my
So-
God, yeah.
All right, guys, I
Okay.
gotta go get on a call here.
Thank you.
Actually, what I gotta do is go get my phone fixed so I can get on a damn call. All right, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
It'll go back to like this without the.